Good morning. My name is Dan Kopp, and I'm coming to you live from Madison, Wisconsin. And today I am with my partner, Ty Firsching, who is coming to us from Uganda. We're going to talk about becoming an enhanced leader, positional versus influential power. Ty, would you like to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. My name is Ty Firsching. I'm a founder and CEO of Active Personal Engagement, I'm coming out of Entebbe, Uganda right now. So today we have an interesting topic, that being positional versus influential power. And I'm excited to be here.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you joining me. I got to admit, we had some technical difficulties this morning. I had a prearranged event planned on LinkedIn, and somehow we were live before we were ready. So I stopped it. I lost it, but we're back on. And we also talked about the fact that I put positional versus influential power on the thumbnail, as you can see on the screen. And we were talking about power last week when we decided on this topic. We were talking about leadership and the abuse of power. And in my mind, I was thinking we were talking more power than leadership, but conceptually, the two could be interchangeable. And we're going to talk about the nuances therein. So I apologize for the delay. We're live. If you're joining us live on LinkedIn or Facebook, feel free to drop a comment in the comment box, and we'll do our best to answer questions live on the air. If you drop in comments and we're unable to answer them because we don't see them or it's later in our broadcast, we'll do our best to answer them the next time we're on. So, Ty, would you like to take us away talking about positional versus influential power?
Yeah, I'd love to. That's going to be great. Let's see, if you weren't with us last week, Dan mentioned something about our relationship. We've known each other quite a while. And Dan mentioned that I was the first person he met when he joined the military. I didn't reciprocate that, but awkwardly or astonishingly enough, Dan was the first person I met as well. We met on a plane before we even made it to basic training. And that's how we became friends before we entered the Army. That final hand raising when we did everything. So we've known each other a long time. And I made a comment last week to Dan that, about positional leadership. And that's how we came into this topic, positional versus influential. I go, Dan, when you and I went in the Army right at 18 years of age, we were leaders. And we weren't leaders because we were in the Army. We were leaders because of our job in the Army. We were both military policemen. And from that alone, put us in a position of authority over everybody. It didn't matter what rank you were. We had a position of authority, no matter what degree. There was a degree of it. Of course, they have rules and regulations when you're arresting a general and stuff like that. But that's a whole different story. But for the most part, everybody we ran into, anybody that's been in longer, we always at our post and when we were on duty had a position of authority. So we grew into that as 18-year-olds. We had this authoritative position, which didn't mean that within our unit, we didn't have a positional authority over everybody. We were still succumb to everybody that was a military police officer in our unit that outranked us. So we had this dichotomy there, which is really fascinating when you think about it, because we had to switch on our leadership. Well, we are in a leadership position when we're on the road or doing whatever we're doing. And when we went back to their units, we still had people that outranked us, and they were in a positional leadership as well. So that's what gave us the idea for positional versus influential leadership. When I got out, I went to school and I used what I learned in the military to transition from being just solely a positional leadership to being more of an influential leader that I like to become, and that power that goes along with it. Dan, you want to weigh in before I continue the journey outside of the military?
Yeah, actually, what I was thinking about when you said that is having that positional power at such a young age really forced us to, here's how I like to call it, you stroke a message, right? You've got to say something that people don't want to hear, but you've got to say it in a manner that doesn't cause problems. So if you're apprehending somebody or addressing someone who outranked you, yet holding them accountable, it wasn't, hey, Major, get over here. It was, you had to stroke the message a little bit. we perfected or started to perfect the nuances of interpersonal relationships and communication, because we did not have that positional power in regard to rank, yet we had the positional power due to our job titles. So I hadn't really thought about where I started down the path of being able to say things that people need to hear in a manner that isn't offensive. But that's where it started. We were forced into a position that caused us to have to stroke a message or spin it, if you will, so that it wasn't offensive when we said stuff. Doesn't mean we didn't hold people accountable. We could still arrest an officer or apprehend an officer using military parlance, but that usually required the officer of the day to be there and do the apprehending. I've done it both ways. But it still came down to, we were young, right out of training in our first couple of years as young military police officers, and we had that power that came with it. And we did straight security in Frankfurt, Germany when we first started, and then we were on the road and patrolling 476 square miles of the greater Frankfurt area. And we encountered people of all ranks, and we had that power, and we were young 20-year-olds, for crying out loud. So it was huge, and there's a vast difference between positional versus influential power.
Yeah, absolutely. And to add on to what you said, when we went in, I'm going to tell who we guarded, because it's kind of interesting. We were at the Abrams Kaserne, which was a 5th Corps headquarters for all of northern Germany for all the U.S. forces. And Colin Powell was our commanding general at the time. We were told, look, the average rank was a major that came through the gate, or something to that effect. Everybody that worked there were a lot of officers, more so than normal posts, just because of the importance of this base. And this is, of course, pre wall coming down. So we got our share, and we honed our ability to do what Dan said. We used tact. There's an ethical consideration when you're talking to someone that outranks you that you had to take in stride. Whether you were right or wrong, you just couldn't. You had to have that. You had to have that modicum of tact. So there was a lot more opportunity for us to employ that, because there are a lot of officers that we talked to. No, we have to do this. Yes, no, we don't. Yeah, and how do we do it? And you kind of are intimidated when you first get there, and you're 18 years old, and all of a sudden you're just talking majors, lieutenant colonels, captains are all around you. It normally doesn't happen that way for most military police officers at that time. They go to another post where it's just a spread out, a little bit more thin, and higher ranking officials. Not to mention dignitaries that came. So we had people coming from all over the place. So again, that gave Dan and I a chance, and I'm speaking for you, Dan, to really get a solid base, a solid foundation on how to broach certain situations. And I took that out from the military. I only stayed in 3 years. Dan stayed in a little bit longer than I did. But I've always employed part of that in what I'm doing, because you don't want to tell your boss that they're just not doing the right job. So, but being in the positional power that I was in, and as a military police officer, I had to talk to people that always outranked me. And I learned how to do that in the private sector, I guess, and the educational sector. Dan?
Absolutely. And I think now, those of you who are watching this, think of your current position. You've got people beside you in most organizations. You've got, unless you're at the very top and you're like the CEO, president, executive director, and there's nobody beside you in the organization, but you've got people beside you. You've got influence over them, whether you want to accept that or not, or you wield it or not. So it can be a positive influence and it can be a negative influence. So we suggest the positive, and you've got the power to be a leader within the position you are in an organization. One of the things we've talked about all the time is take care of your people. Well, you've got teammates beside you in the organization. Take care of them. That's part of being a leader. You've got clients, customers, people you serve in your organization. Take care of them. That's part of being a leader. You don't have to be in a leadership role in order to do that. And once you move up in an organizational chart, you will have a chance to have positional power. You may have it now, but keep in mind, you still got to do the same things to be successful. You've got to take care of the people beside you in the organization. Ty mentioned tactfully saying to your boss, things aren't going well, boss, or here's what you may have not done the greatest. That's taking care of your boss, because ultimately that takes care of the organization. And if you help your boss course correct, it's going to help your teammates, it's going to help the organization, it's going to help the people you serve. So it's important to recognize influential leadership and power versus positional leadership and power, and you can learn from both. And you've got the ability to exert that influence and that power regardless of where you are in an organization.
Right.
The idea is to be able to say it, and Ty said it better than I did, using tact. You've got to say it in a manner that doesn't come off as offensive. So it doesn't mean tomorrow you're going to be perfect at exuding this influential power laterally in your organization, but you can start working on it and thinking about it for the good of your own position, for the good of your teammates, for the good of the organization and the people you serve. Whether you're making widgets, you're in a nonprofit serving the community, you're in a straight up straight to consumer business, and you're trying to make whatever. It doesn't matter what your position is in an organization. You have power that you can control and exert for good.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the different sectors that we work in. I've worked in two. I've been a director of a nonprofit, and I've worked in education, and I've also worked in the private industry. So I guess I've worked in three. And there's people in private or for business or for-profit organizations can really learn a lot if they just spent a month in either a volunteer organization or in a classroom. Okay, I'm going to speak to the classroom, and it was also with a volunteer organization. You know, you go to school, you get a degree, and all of a sudden you're thrust in front of a classroom in front of 20, 30 kids. Okay, it doesn't mean that you're a leader at that point, but it doesn't mean that the kids are going to respect you by your power. Okay, it's quite the opposite, because a classroom will turn on you like that if you go after someone in the class because of your authority, because of the I said so, which there is a bit of that. You know, look, this is the way the rules are. Okay, there's a bit of that, but there's also unnecessarily they're like piranha. Once they see a little bit of blood, see you going after it, they'll turn their backs on you. They won't do their work like they should. And Dan can, I see you smiling, Dan, so you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Points you have to be like, okay. So you learn how to win their hearts, because that's what it's all about. When you're leading by influence and trying to get out of that positional realm where you have to do what I say because I went to college and I have a degree and you're a first-year teacher. And they're like, really? They eat first-year teachers alive. That's why the average teacher lasts 3 years. Generally, well, pay is an issue, but if you don't build that connection, that relationship with your subordinates, in this case, children, right, or students, and it doesn't matter if it's in high school or college. I've taught both. It's the same thing. You have to build that relationship. If you build it and they trust you, they will work hard for you. When I went into the private sector, wow, that, bam, I went like this, rising in the ranks, because people trusted me and they did anything for me within reason. They worked for you. They worked hard for you. Dan, you want to?
You said a lot. Calling a classroom full of kids piranhas is right. If you show a weakness, or you're a pushover, they're going to take advantage of you. They're going to ignore you. They're not going to work hard for you, etc. I agree 100%. Having taught for 5 years, I know what you're talking about. And then I was thinking, not once did you say you have to exert your power once you're in a position of leadership. People should know you've got to earn their respect. You've got to show them that you're there for them. Use I think an overused cliche, but lead by example. I talk about in my book, and one of my tenets is let your actions speak for themselves. You've got to earn that. You've got to trust them so they in turn trust you. Never once have Ty and I thought about using the words, I said so, or you've got to listen to me because I'm in charge. I actually had two high-level executives work for me in the last 10 years. And at different times, they came to me and said, don't you just hate it when you have to remind people that you're in charge? I said, oh boy, it is time to update your resume, because if you have to remind people that you're in charge, something has gone off the rails and it's time for you to find a job that better fits you. So if you have to remind people you're in charge, you've got a problem on your hand. You've got to take a step back, maybe get a new job, and figure out what went wrong. Why do they not just know that? I've been in a leadership position for 35 years, and not once have I had to tell people I'm in charge. Getting back to our military days, I remember some of the old timers that we encountered when we first got to Germany back in the day in the middle of the Cold War. They were fond of the phrase, don't confuse your rank with my authority. Oh, that goes over well with some butterbar lieutenant who's just looking to wield his or her power, right? Yeah, the lieutenant may outrank you and you may have positional power because of your military police, but that's I'm in charge, you will listen to me. That doesn't work. And if you've got to resort to acts like that, then you've got a problem. And it's time to rethink your career, rethink your place of employment, something, because it's not logical what you're doing. And it's, at the very least, it's time to update the resume. And if your boss knew what was going on, like it occurred with me, I would help you land on your feet elsewhere in a place that better suited your abilities. That's what needs to happen for the good of the organization. So it's about earning respect. It's about leading by example, letting your actions speak for themselves, respecting those around you, those above you in the organization, those below you in the organizational chart. Once you do that, prove your worth, people will respect you and follow you in kind, whether you're exerting influential power or positional power. So it looks like we have
absolutely. And there's a balance that goes on. Now,
go ahead.
No, there's a little bit of a lag. I'm not exactly sure where it's coming at because you're freezing up and then I'm catching the words later. So hopefully on the recording, it'll be better. But there's a little balance that needs to be going on. And with active personal engagement, that program, my program, is really leaning towards the influential leadership style. Although there's necessarily times where you have to make that decision and you have to do it as a leader and be the sole decision maker. And that's, again, leading by position. But if you integrate what's the best decision to make for everyone involved, then again, you're becoming more of an influential leader and you're being authentic. You're being authentic to the people you're leading, whether they're peers or whether they're subordinates or whether they're people above you. They see that. And when they see that, it lends credibility to your leadership style and how you broach situations and process. It's huge when your department, you have a team leader that is leading like that. It not only affects the people beneath that team leader, but it affects the other people at their level of team leader. They want to know why this guy's people work so hard for him, and I have the same issue. I don't have that. They're working hard for me. They take a look at what you're doing that's different than anybody else. Dan has a story about that, why it worked for him, and I forget what it was, but it was quite interesting. I had that as a teacher. Students work hard for me, and they're like, well, why aren't you like Mr. Firsching? Like that. I'm not Mr. Firsching. I'm like, well, yes, that's evident. The students are telling this teacher that, and they come and ask me, well, why do they work so hard for you? I'm like, because I'll go to bat for them for anything. And they learned that early on, and they got that trust. Go, hey, he actually cares. One of the biggest insults was from a student who I actually kicked out of class his sophomore year because he was just unruly. And it was, I think, my second year teaching. And he actually had to take my class to graduate, came back 2 years later. And he was a star wrestler, ranked 7th in the nation on takedowns. Probably could have gave me a run for my money if not taken me. And he's sitting in class full of freshmen and sophomores, This is the credit he needs. I'm the only one teaching it. And he's sitting there, and weeks into class, he goes, Mr. Firsching, you know what your problem is? And I'm like, oh, here we go. I'm like, no, Derek, what's my problem? He goes, you care too much. And he saw how frustrated I get when students weren't doing what the best that they could, that I could see that they could do better. And he saw, and I go, I think that's either an insult or a compliment, but either way, it's the nicest one I got on either end. But he recognized it, and the kid's 18, right? So, Dan, go ahead. It just
there you go.
It goes to show you.
It comes down to taking care of your people. You gave an anecdotal story about taking care of your people. You took care of your kids. They respected you, and they worked for you, and they reached their potential because you were there to support them in anything they needed. And that's what it's about. And if you've got influential power or you've got positional power, start with taking care of your people, and that will go a long way to your success. All right. Any closing thoughts, Mr. Firsching?
Yeah. Been a while since I've been told that. Yeah. It all boils down. The last thing I wanted to is, if you're a good leader, you're going to win them over. You're going to win over because you know your job. And that's another thing we didn't even talk about, but you should know your job in and out. You should know everything there is to know about it, at least when you're leading people. You have to be authentic, and you have to demonstrate to your people that you're actually adding value to their lives. What are you doing? What are you doing that's adding value to them, not only professionally, but personally? Because if they see something, when you win their hearts, you got it. You're moving on.
Right on.
Dan?
Well said. Well, Ty and I are going to come to you live on LinkedIn, and we also have a YouTube channel entitled Enhanced Leadership, so you can see our videos there. We're going to do this at least weekly, and we are working towards becoming enhanced leaders, and we are helping others become enhanced leaders. So stay tuned in future episodes. We'll be talking about a myriad of topics. And if you're joining us live, feel free to drop some comments, questions in the box, and we'll do our best to answer them. And with the caveat being, we do not necessarily have all the right answers, but we've got answers you may not otherwise have considered that may enlighten the path you need to take. So feel free to engage with us. If you like to work with us and become an enhanced leader, our emails are at the bottom of the screen. You can always hit us up on LinkedIn as well. And again, you can jump over on YouTube and go to Enhanced Leadership and view these videos at your leisure. So until next time, I'm Dan Kopp from Madison, and that's Ty from Uganda, and we will see you in the near future. This is good leadership, people. You can do this. Good luck.